This is a Detroit-style pizza. Its characteristic light and fluffy yet amazingly crispy crust is the perfect base for pretty much any topping combination. So let's make one. For this dough recipe, you'll need 450 grams of room temperature water, 3 grams of instant yeast, 600 grams unbleached bread flour, 12 grams of sea salt, and 15 grams of olive oil. This recipe will yield enough dough for 2 10 by 14 inch Detroit pizzas. I do recommend getting an actual Detroit-style steel pan if you don't have one. There's a link in the description for the ones I like. Okay, so in a large mixing bowl, I'll add my water, then yeast, next half of my flour, mix that all up, then I'll add the rest of my flour and the salt and olive oil. Mix that until the flour is absorbed and you have a shaggy and tacky dough. It'll be nearly impossible to work it much more until the flour has a chance to hydrate. So cover and let it rest for 5 to 10 minutes. After that time, I'll uncover it and do a series of stretch and folds right in the bowl. Cover and let it rest for another 5 to 10 minutes. Then I'll grease a section of counter or a cutting board and transfer my dough onto it. From here, I'll do a series of stretch and folds for a minute or two. Stretch and fold it back, rotate and repeat. Cover it with your mixing bowl and come back to it again in 10 minutes. At this point, it should be pretty strong and able to pass the window pane test. Now I'll go ahead and divide my dough into the appropriate size for the pan I'm using. That means 2 balls that are about 18 ounces for me, but here's a guide for the different portions based on pan size. I'll include a link for the size guide in the description as well. Once your dough is all portioned up, you'll want to ball it up. Get your hands moist, and then I just pull the dough apart and then fold it back on itself. Rotate 45 degrees and repeat until a tight ball forms. I'll throw my balls into a lightly greased container and let them ferment in the fridge for 12 to 24 hours until it's time to make pizza. About 2 to 3 hours before pizza time, I'll take my dough out of the fridge and let it warm up. I'll also grab my pizza pan and grease it up. You can use olive oil or butter. I'm just going to rub some softened butter all over mine to prepare it. Transfer your dough to the pan, press down lightly on the dough and spread it towards the edges. Probably won't be able to stretch it to the edges right away. That's okay. Spread it as much as you can without tearing or degassing the whole thing, then cover lightly in plastic wrap and set aside for 30 minutes to allow the dough to relax. After the 30 minutes, the dough is relaxed and easily stretches all the way. To get the dough to stay in the corners, stretch it up and beyond the corner so that it pulls back into place. Once the dough is fully stretched, cover it again and set aside for 2 to 3 hours before you make your pizza. At this point, you want to go ahead and preheat your oven to its max temp, somewhere between 500 and 550 degrees. If you have a pizza steel, go ahead and throw that in there too. It's not necessary, but it is helpful to make sure the bottom of your pizza gets a good caramelization. When the time comes to make your pizza, give your dough a few dimples with moist fingers to give it a nice rustic crumb structure and make sure the dough is in good contact with the bottom of the pan. Go ahead and top it the way you like. But if you want to keep it traditional, you want to cube up some Wisconsin brick cheese and some shredded cheddar or shredder. Lay down your cubed brick cheese first and then add the shredded cheddar. Make sure you put ample cheddar cheese all along the rim of the pizza. This is going to create that super crispy frico edge. And then finally, sauce on top of your cheese. I actually like to bake mine for 8 minutes with no sauce, then take the pizza out and add the sauce at that point. Then I'll bake for an additional 4 to 6 minutes. When it comes out, you'll want to use some sort of spatula to free it from the pan, and then transfer it to a cooling rack so that it can rest for a minute before you cut it. This short period of rest will help make sure your pizza stays super crispy. That's it, Detroit-style pizza. Bon appetit!